Hi everybody. We'll just wait a few more minutes until we've got everyone registered and on screen, and then we'll start. I must say I've been blown away by how many people have registered for this webinar. Obviously, we really need to be doing this education. You all want it so badly. It's over 550 people, so amazing, everybody. So welcome to Medicinal Cannabis and You. This is a webinar that has been designed for you, the patient, to give you the information that you need to decide whether medicinal cannabis is good for your condition, to find out what it is and how that you can access it. We've got so much information to impart for you this afternoon. My name's Sharlene Mavor. I'm a medical scientist and also Managing Director of Medical Cannabis Research Australia. So MCRA is a registered Australian charity that was formed back in 2016, just around the same time as medicinal cannabis was becoming legal. Once knowing about medicinal cannabis, we realised we needed a platform from which to educate medical practitioners, also patients and their carers, legislators and decision makers, and the general public about medicinal cannabis. We also have a strong mission to advocate for increased patient access to medicinal cannabis, and also to be looking at lobbying for subsidies for patient access as well. So I'm also very passionate about clinical research. So I do share a lot of information on clinical trials. I promote them, and we're also actively involved in facilitating clinical trials as well. So I'll just run very quickly through our panel for you. So other than myself, we have Dr. Jamie Rickcord from Ananda Clinics talking about conditions and evidence, Barb Fullerton from Green Pharma talking about the Australian industry in cultivation and manufacture. I'll be talking about current Aussie clinical trials. Paul Mavor from Health House will be talking about dosage forms, formulations and other pharmaceutical indications. And I do have two special guests who are patients who have kindly shared their story with me. So it's going to be an amazing webinar. Now, once again, I just wanted to remind you, please put your questions in the Q&A function. We will be having our online, well, I should say our panel of all of our presenters at the end, around 45 minutes in. So we'll be posing all of your questions to our panel then. Okay, without further ado, I think we'll start our first presentation.
Hello everybody, my name is Dr. Jamie Rickcord, and I'm going to do about a 15-minute talk on medicinal cannabis and the evidence for some of the major uses that we have in clinical practice currently. So, medicinal cannabis really involves a different way of thinking and a new way of thinking. If we consider that the endocannabinoid system is really a very complex biological system that is fairly new in terms of medical acceptance. And I think currently it's important to note that medicinal cannabis is not about cure. We are treating difficult symptoms associated with a number of conditions, and that way alleviate symptoms and improve quality of life, whilst at the same time reducing polypharmacy, steering some of our patients away from more addictive drugs that often are not particularly helpful for them. And today we're going to focus on pain, anxiety, and sleep. We know cannabinoids have therapeutic potential by way of their interaction through the endocannabinoid system, and they really act to mimic the endocannabinoids, anandamide and 2-AG. CBD, cannabidiol, is the non-intoxicating component, and often alleviates some of the more negative side effects of THC. And THC, delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, is the major psychoactive component and what has been sought for recreation in the times of prohibition, which have also really led to the sort of selective breeding of plants to exclude CBD, which, as we're now discovering, was an error. And both compounds are very effective in treating a number of different conditions. I think importantly, medicinal cannabis has a very low acute toxicity. And if we look at these figures at the top here, a lethal dose in mammals of THC is more than 800 milligrams per kilogram. So in someone, excuse me, my size, we're looking at about $10,000 worth of THC. And in humans, CBD more than 1,000 milligrams per kilogram. And that really is a similar sort of cost, $10,000 or so. Interestingly, in this review of poisoning deaths in the US over a 15-year period, cannabis resulted in no deaths directly linked to overdose. And that is due to the fact it has minimal agonistic effects at CB1 receptors in the brainstem and cardiorespiratory centers, unlike the others listed above that, opioids being number one. So medicinal cannabis for pain. This is the most common indication currently in Australia. And there's a fair amount of evidence gathering. This is a study that was published last year looking at the Minnesota Medical Cannabis Program. And the conclusion here, patients with cancer enrolled in Minnesota's medical cannabis program showed significant reduction across all 8 symptoms assessed within 4 months of program participation. So medicinal cannabis was well tolerated, and some patients attained clinically meaningful and lasting levels of improvement. And I think those of us who are practicing in this field would echo those sentiments. And I've sort of come to really look at it now as breaking the pain cycle, especially in chronic pain patients. Randomized controlled trials of chronic non-cancer pain, a meta-analysis looked at 28 trials. Here's 12 listed. I won't go through them all. The overall conclusion was a 30 to 50% decrease in reported visual analog scale, which is similar to some of the more commonly used and accepted pain medications that are in clinical practice today. So pregabalin, Lyrica, often used for neuropathic pain. And this study was really focusing on HIV, but found some use. And from the same library, the Cochrane Library, cannabis-based medicines, excuse me, for chronic neuropathic pain in adults. All cannabis-based medications were better than placebo for the outcomes, substantial and moderate pain relief. And pulled together, they were better than placebo in reducing pain intensity, sleep problems, and psychological distress. Cannabinoids are very useful in fibromyalgia, and there is increasing evidence that, increasing evidence and theory that fibromyalgia is actually a disorder of the endocannabinoid system, or an endocannabinoid deficiency. And the conclusion from this study, again last year, that cannabinoids are safe and effective treatment for fibro. But we still need to standardize compounds and regimes. Medicinal cannabis could be the key to stopping a US-style opioid crisis in the UK, and that applies globally, to be honest. And this is a nice little graph from the US looking at states where medicinal cannabis laws had sort of relaxed. There was an decrease in prescriptions, decrease in doses, decrease in hospitalizations, and most importantly, a very significant decrease in opioid mortality. Anxiety, medicinal cannabis for anxiety. So after pain, another huge part of my practice. This is a little headline. A significant number of patients stopped taking benzodiazepines after starting medicinal cannabis. There's 146 patients, and nearly 50% stopped using benzodiazepines, which is not something to be ignored. GPs are the first point of contact for people with mental health problems such as anxiety, and we know that the lifetime prevalence of these mental health problems is significant and increasing given the current pandemic we're all living through. So we really do need new treatments. And the current treatments are psychological therapies, which I don't think any of us would deny are probably the cornerstone of treating or helping patients deal with these symptoms. Antidepressants, benzodiazepines. 40 to 60% of patients do not attain total relief from their symptoms of anxiety with these treatments. So again, we need new options. There have been a number of studies looking at anxiety and cannabis. So I think the sort of sentiment that there's not enough evidence for the use of cannabinoids is inaccurate, and will have to change. This first study, Bergamashi et al., CBD can reduce symptoms of generalized social anxiety in treatment-naive social phobia patients. The next one, Cripper et al., CBD can mitigate anxiety in SAD and may be related to its effects on activity in the limbic and paralimbic areas, which is really fascinating if we think about, emotional trauma and attachment injury as being a major contributor to the etiology of anxiety. Patients are hypervigilant, sympathetic nervous systems in overdrive, enlarged amygdalas, and operating from sort of much more basic brainstem aspect of their consciousness as opposed to the prefrontal cortex. And I think there is a lot of work to be done looking at CBD in conjunction with therapies like psychotherapy to see if we can really help our patients regulate. And we talk about homeostasis a lot in cannabinoid medicine. Humans regulate in relationship. That's another form of homeostasis. So it would make sense that embracing this kind of neuropharmacology with CBD is going to assist us in treating trauma. A number of other studies here. The Cutler et al. 2018, medicinal cannabis users had a 50% reduction in depression and 58% reduction in anxiety, and that was using an inhalation method. This is a fascinating paper that Dr. Russo released in 2016, and was a review really of earlier work that was done in 2004 and 2006, where they were looking at endocannabinoid deficiency. And some of the more interesting parts that I drew out from the article, recent research in humans has clarified the role of the endocannabinoid system in post-traumatic stress. 46 survivors of the World Trade Center attacks were studied. Serum 2-AG, so the sort of endogenous equivalent of CBD, was significantly reduced in PTSD symptoms victims versus those without PTSD symptoms, especially with those with a direct exposure, suggesting a promotion of retention of aversive memories. And a negative relationship was also noted between anandamide levels and intrusive symptoms. So here we have a endocannabinoid system that's lost its tone, and with that tone seems to be a greater association with PTSD, and I suspect how those memories are being encoded. Cortisol levels were lower in PTSD with trauma patients versus control, and anandamide and cortisol together correctly identified 85% of PTSD cases. Moving away from anxiety, we know that ECS is involved in other psychiatric syndromes, and I think the general understanding is moving away from the failure of monoamine neurotransmission, which is where most current sort of pharmacological treatments are aimed, and more of a disorder of CNS plasticity and with an inflammatory component, which really, again, is sort of going back to what I was talking about, treating trauma and the brain changes associated with humans' exposure to traumatic events. Anandamide levels were 8-fold higher in the CSF of untreated acute schizophrenics and in controls, and was negatively correlated with psychotic symptoms. which represents a compensatory mechanism. We also know that CBD is an antipsychotic, so I think as the science evolves around this system and our understanding of these compounds, we are going to find some very effective treatments moving forward. The last category I'm going to talk about is sleep disorders. Again, a number of studies have been conducted looking at sleep. Whiting et al. 2015, THC or a combination of THC and CBD were associated with greater improvements in insomnia, sleep restfulness, and sleep quality. The position of National Academy Sciences in 2017 was that there's a moderate evidence grade in sleep disorders. And the last one there, Bestard and Toth, looked at insomnia or sleep problems around peripheral neuropathy. So insomnia or sleep problems come in a number of forms: pure insomnia, OSA, so obstructive sleep apnea, and difficulties around using that machinery, as well as the actual pathological process, nightmares, especially in PTSD, and sleep and pain conditions. And one of the synthetic cannabinoids, nabilone, has been looked at in those groups. And there was a study that was concluded last year in Australia that I think will be published fairly soon, which really showed a 26% reduction in insomnia scores. So the main uses, we have really looked at 3 of them in the last few minutes, pain being the most, and that includes fibromyalgia, migraine, neuropathic pain, chronic pain, cancer symptoms, psychological anxiety, epilepsy, movement disorders, and sleep. And this is a bit old now, this slide, but the SASB approvals are rising every month. I think last month was 6,000, so it's almost doubled since the start of this year, and I don't think this is going to slow down. And with that, Australia really is now leading the way with the SASB program and the collection of data. A number of trials are underway. A number of us are collecting data as we go, and the SASB is really one of the largest observational trials ever conducted around cannabinoid prescribing and the indications for which it's being prescribed. And I think the next few years are going to be extremely informative and very exciting for Australia, as we really are pushing ahead in this space and collecting the data that we need to prove what many of us already understand, that these are safe and extremely effective medicines when used correctly. Thank you.
Hi, I'm here with Lesley. She's a prescribed patient, and she's going to just tell us a little bit about her journey with cancer and other conditions with medicinal cannabis. Lesley, please tell us what condition you've got and why you started taking medicinal cannabis.
Hi, Sharlene. I was diagnosed with stage 4B endometrial cancer. And yeah, I went through all the treatment and stuff like that, and I decided if it came back, which it did come back everywhere, that I'd try cannabis oil. So yeah, that's why I guess, you know, anyone that's been through chemo and radiation, really, it's that makes you that ill that you never want to do it again, put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. So when you started taking the oil, what were you told was actually in the oil?
A very high CBD with very little THC. So I thought, well, I'll start on that and see how I went. And obviously I went very well on that.
Mm-hmm. So how exactly do you think it helped you?
Well, the cancer markers started dropping immediately, but my chronic eczema disappeared in the first week. My arthritis disappeared. My PTSD with the anxiety with the cancer diagnosis and it coming back, that helped that. Helps with sleep, it helped with, so many things, you know, hay fever, you name it. It helps with everything, I think.
Yeah. So when your doctors found out that you were taking medicinal cannabis, what were their reactions? And, you know, what did they see was happening?
My oncologist, well, he didn't know initially. He just thought it was the letrozole that he'd put me on, because I said I wasn't going to do chemo again. He didn't really think too much about it at that stage, but when the next lot of scans came back, he put the scans up, PET scan and CAT scan, and he said, look at this. He said, can't see one bit of uptake in your entire body. He was absolutely shocked. So he was amazed, and he told me to keep doing exactly what I was doing. So
Yep.
that was pretty pleasing to hear.
Yep. And your friends and your family, were they supportive of you using medicinal cannabis? And what were their reactions to the outcome?
Well, originally they thought I'd lost the plot because I'm a person that was completely against cannabis, and you know, because it's illegal. And I thought, you know, no. And then, as I said, when this cancer came into my life, and as I said, you go through chemo and radiation, and you never want to do that again. So I'd researched and I heard about medicinal cannabis. So I thought, well, I'll do what the pharmaceuticals tell me to do first, but otherwise I'm going to try the oil if I don't get success. So yeah, that's how I started the oil. And the family, as I said, they thought I'd lost the plot, but they soon saw the difference, and it was amazing, you know, and the journey's been amazing up to date.
Yep. And right now you're cancer free, aren't you?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I've got scans coming up again in November. So this is scanxiety time, as they call it in the cancer world. But yeah, I mean, the threat was always there. You think, oh my God, you know, because as you know, it's stage 4B. I mean, it's not the best stage to start at. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But all good so far. So hopefully it'll be all good.
So that story on its own is just amazing anyway, but you've actually got another really positive story to tell about your mother.
That's
So
right.
tell us all about your mum.
Well, because I knew what the cannabis oil can do for myself, Mum, she's 89, she was at the stages of late stage dementia. And she was at the stage where they were just sort of locking in the room because she's too disturbing. She was not coherent or anything. And I thought, well, at least if we could get her calmed down, that she's not screaming out and causing so much noise, you know. So anyway, as I said, we went through all of that, and finally we've got her on what we think is a better dosing today. And it's been a complete turnaround. This is the first time Mum said my name in 2 years, and that's pretty amazing.
That is amazing. And was it hard to kind of approach her doctor about wanting to try medicinal cannabis?
Actually, they were really good. It was the nursing home there, and between that and the doctor, they didn't really have a problem with it. They just thought, oh yeah, why not? You know, they didn't have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if they thought maybe they thought I'd lost the plot too. I don't know.
But then their minds are changed now, right, Lesley? Because she's just having such wonderful results on the cannabis oil. And, you know, the doctors, the nursing staff, everybody has been amazed with her improvement, haven't they?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they've actually got a couple of others on at the nursing home since now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good news. That's just proof, isn't it? It's just proof it's working.
Yeah.
That's all we've got time for right now with you, Lesley. But thank you so much for your time and having a chat with me. And we'll be talking to you a bit later when we're running the panel. Thanks, Lesley.
Darling. Thank you very much.
Hey guys, I'm Paul Mavor. I'm a pharmacist for a company called Health House, and I specialise in medical cannabis. I'm going to be talking to you today about a few issues surrounding cannabis as medicine. And my presentation today is general in nature, so if you need any specific advice about you or your medical condition, please consult your trusted healthcare professional. Firstly, cannabis is not a universal panacea or cure-all. It is essentially another tool in the box. And in a lot of disease states, it's not the first-line treatment. It's only used when other options fail. And for a lot of patients, particularly those with chronic pain, which is the biggest use, it can reduce the pain score and improve quality of life. We've seen some really great results so far. Unlike pharmaceutical opioids, cannabis use as a medicine has some unique properties. Firstly, it's quite low on the addiction scale. It's about half as addictive on this scale as legal drugs like alcohol and tobacco, and it's even slightly less addictive than coffee or caffeine, which isn't on this scale. It's also almost impossible to overdose on, consume almost a ton of cannabis, which is physically impossible. And as a result, there's almost no recorded deaths from cannabis compared to pharmaceutical opioids, which are responsible for between 700 and 1,000 fatalities each year in Australia. Some of the types of dosage forms we've seen of medical cannabis in Australia so far include oils, tinctures, sprays, capsules, and flower or smoke cannabis. Smoke cannabis isn't used very much because it's probably not appropriate in the elderly and or very young, and different patients inhale different amounts of smoke into their lungs. And there's also some up and coming interesting dosage forms which are looking at hitting the market soon. Things like topicals, creams and so forth, inhalers that are metered dose and connect to patients' smartphones, and also patches, so watch this space. The most common dosage form currently is oils or tinctures, and prescribers like this dosage form because it's given under the tongue, really well absorbed, and patients can start on a very low dose and titrate upwards, hopefully until they receive the benefit. Here's an example of a dosage schedule. Patient starts at day 1 with just a nighttime, very small dose, and over 2 weeks they might titrate up to an effective dose. And it's sometimes given 3 times a day, though this chart shows twice a day. It's best after meals for absorption. And the golden rule of thumb is start low, go slow, and patients hopefully get help rather than high. And mostly patients on this smaller dose don't have psychotropic effects or have any problems with getting high. Cannabis is generally pretty well tolerated with other medications. There are a few ones to watch out for. I'm just going to discuss them now. In no particular order, things you should watch out for are things like blood thinners, like warfarin and a drug called clopidogrel. It doesn't mean that you can't have these drugs at the same time. It just means they should be more carefully monitored than patients without taking anything. Another class of drugs is anything that makes you drowsy, and things like benzodiazepines commonly used to get patients to sleep at night, pharmaceutical opioids, and tranquilizer. And these drugs can have a concurrent effect on drowsiness. So whilst it can be given at the same time, you should use them with caution, and you might limit them to, say, a nighttime dose when it doesn't matter whether the patient's a little bit more drowsy because they're going to be going to sleep anyway. Because cannabis causes patients to be relaxed, it sometimes has an effect to lower blood pressure. So any blood pressure medication may need to be monitored with a view to reducing the strength. And also anything that is metabolized or absorbed in the body by the same enzymes as cannabis. And that includes quite a few drugs for seizures, and the most common being a drug called clobazam, which is also known by the brand name Frisium. This isn't used very much, so it's not a really big deal. There's also a couple of medical conditions to watch out for. Children, they don't give cannabis as a first-line treatment unless the risk outweighs the benefit. It might do so in things like drug-resistant seizures, which are far more dangerous than any potential benefit, downside of cannabis as a medicine. Things like also pregnancy and breastfeeding, use cannabis. You don't use cannabis because they're not really sure what happens. But once again, if there is a potential life-threatening condition the patient suffers from, it may be a medical option. And they also use with caution with addicts who are addicted to all drugs, and also people with mental illnesses like psychosis and or schizophrenia. I want to talk briefly about the cost of cannabis. Unfortunately, at the moment, it sits as a private prescription. The average cannabis patient uses spend, should I say, about $200 to $250 currently per month. It's not subsidised by the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme, but hopefully in the future that they can come up with an economical argument that shows that it's keeping chronically ill patients out of the hospital system, which costs about $2,000 per patient per day, so it could be cash flow positive in that regard. We're already seeing some health funds cover it some of the times, not always. They're still working through that, but we're seeing subsidies from motor vehicle accident patients, workers' compensation patients, and some repatriation or war veteran patients are getting access. Cannabis and driving is an interesting one because we've got 6 states of Australia and 6 different drug driving laws, but generally the golden rule of thumb is do not drive impaired. Now, many cannabis patients are taking small amounts of THC. They're not impaired, it's not psychoactive, but they're being asked to sign some paperwork saying they will not drive. CBD only products are not a problem. They're 100% safe to drive, but if in doubt, ask your healthcare professional. And hopefully one day soon they'll rationalise these laws so it is fair and equitable for patients taking it as a medicine that have got a valid prescription that are not impaired. So one good bit of news on up and coming is CBD looks set to be considered as potentially being available over the counter in Australian pharmacies. There's a move underway which could potentially see it transferred from Schedule 4, which is prescription only, to Schedule 3, which means it's available over the counter. And that looks like happening in February 2021. And it is supported by the government. It was proposed by them, and they produced a paper showing CBD was quite safe because it is sold over the counter in a number of other countries throughout the world, including the US, Canada, and a lot of countries throughout Europe. So this could have a really positive effect moving forward on prices and accessibility. So that's all from me. I very much look forward to answering any of your questions later on. Thank you very much for having me.
Hi everyone. We're going to have a bit of a chat to Catherine here. She's going to tell us about her journey with her son and medicinal cannabis. So welcome, Catherine.
Hi.
Kat, tell us about Carter and his condition and what medications you had previously tried.
Okay, hi everyone. My son Carter is 8.5. He has level 3 autism. He has spastic diplegic cerebral palsy. He has a number of other conditions as well. We have been on, I think we're at 12 different medications for pain, etc., to manage his pain and behaviours and things, all with pretty horrific side effects, and also many of them highly, highly addictive, and very large doses of them as well.
Mm-hmm. So Kat, was it really hard to find a doctor to prescribe, and how willing was your paediatrician to sign off on this as well?
That's a complex one, but I'll answer briefly. It was very difficult. Originally, we got the major pushback from all of our specialists at our local children's hospital. We then received support for CBD through our paediatrician, and it was then removed almost a year later. He champions us from the sidelines, but bureaucratic red tape, etc., gets in the way. So our GP, who is prescribing, is now helping us fight to get it through Sydney. So we're having to go through a cannabis clinic in Sydney and have it dispensed and delivered to Western Australia from over there, and it's very difficult. But we have recently had a paediatric specialist come on board in support, and our GP will now be able to prescribe from Western Australia, and it will be much easier. But it has been many years fighting.
Yep, that's great. That's really great news. So what oil formulation are you trying now, and has the dosing been difficult?
So Carter has actually just been put on through Sydney, we have finally received a Thc Cbd oil. Previously, we were on CBD only. So he's now currently on 1 milligram of THC per mil and 25 milligrams of CBD per mil. And he's on 2 mils a day. That will be titrated up over the next 6 weeks till we get to a comfortable position. However, previously he's been on 2 other CBD only. One, he was on 200 milligrams of CBD a day, and we got to a point where it was working really well, but we were continuing, because of his weight gain, we were having to increase the dosage, and that was becoming cost prohibitive. So our GP put us on a lower dose but more mils per day, and that was working wonderful. And he suggested that, look, we should look into THC to deal with some of this more severe non-joint pain, inflammation, more nerve pain, bone pain sort of thing.
And have you seen any side effects at all?
Apart from wonderful weight gain for a previously grossly underweight child, nope.
No.
We were warned of potential bowel involvement, of maybe diarrhea or things like that, but it actually worked incredibly well for us, and we no longer have to use enemas or suppositories or stool softeners, which he had to use religiously every single day for his entire life until we started, and we've now not used it in 10 months.
So have you had anything like sleepiness, or he looks like he's high?
No. So a lot of people ask me, oh, is he going to be really high? Like, is it going to be like, dude, where's my card? Nope. The types of drugs that he's on, so one of them is 10 milligrams of Valium a day. That's huge for an 8-year-old. It's a lot. He previously would be so drowsy that he would miss many days of school. He would sleep at school a lot. Now on the cannabis, he also never used to sleep through the night. He would wake between 20 plus times a night. He's now sleeping through the night solidly. He does have moments of breakthrough pain and we have to deal, but he's sleeping incredibly well, but it's not affecting him during the day at all. And he has it morning and night. So he's doing
fantastic. Because I mean, a lot of parents would be wondering this, oh my God, I don't want to give something to my child that's going to make him high, but it doesn't work that way, does it? And the amount of THC that the kids are having is really low. It's quite titrating up.
Yeah, and we start, for example, we start at 0.1 of a mil total.
Yeah.
So, and we are also titrating. We still have our CBD only oil, so we are fiddling with both until we get to a position. It's not like traditional medication where a doctor goes, here's a 2 milligram tablet of diazepam. That's the standard dose across the board. This is an individual dosing for each person, and some people are more sensitive, some people are less sensitive, and his is working quite well. And once we get to that sweet spot, we just stop. And he's not high, he's just calm, he's not in pain.
Yeah.
So,
and my last and most important question, how has Carter progressed on medicinal cannabis?
Well, I'm going to try and share my screen. I hope it works, but I apologize, I'm not a tech savvy person. This is okay. Yes. Okay, so here we go. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so just quickly, top left picture is September last year, a month before we started cannabis. He was black circles, pale. You can see every bone in his body, incredibly underweight. The second picture in the middle of the top is about a week before he started. The third picture on top right is a couple of weeks after he started, and you can see already he's starting to fill out a little bit. The bottom left, where he has a tinfoil hat, he had gained a couple of kilos and his rib cage was starting to disappear. January 2020, he, for the first time in his life, had belly rolls, and he had had the same length feeding button in his stomach since he was 3, and that hadn't changed because he hadn't really gained a lot of weight. And the last picture on the right, which is my favorite, was taken last week, and I have his permission to share because he knows that I'm doing this today. Was taken last week, and he is now 40 kilos. The first picture, he was just 20 kilos, and he's now 40, almost 41 kilos.
That's a picture of a happy, healthy boy.
He has rosy cheeks. He's not grey and looking unwell. He has rosy cheeks, no dark circles under his eyes. And look at him, he's healthy. He is a healthy 8.5-year-old boy, and he's happy. He's really, really happy.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Kat, that's all we've got time for today.
No.
Thank you so much for telling us your story, and I know that you've given hope to so many other parents out there. So thank you for your fight. You're fighting for other people and setting a precedent. So I applaud you.
Well, I'm happy to help, because if we don't, then we get nowhere. And the people who trailblazed before me got us to the point where we are, and it's my turn to help the next lot of people.
Yeah. So we'll grab you back online a bit later for our patient Q&A.
Yeah, of course, anytime.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, my name is Barb Fullerton. I am the National Education Manager at Little Green Pharma, and I'm going to take you through an Australian cannabis update from the patient and doctor perspective, to give you some insights, as well as a seed to sale and what happens in terms of producing a medicinal cannabis product. So Little Green Pharma, it was the first company to grow and produce Australian medical cannabis, and so I'll take you through that process and what we do. So just a really brief overview. So cannabis in Australia, or sorry, on a global scale, although it's been around for hundreds and thousands of years, and used in China, all across Asia, Europe for a long time, it wasn't until 1965 that this gentleman in the top right-hand corner discovered THC for the first time. So it was really then that we started to understand the plant and the properties that had the therapeutic benefits. Now, we'll talk in more detail, because THC is just one of many active components in cannabis, but just to give you that perspective. Taking you through a quick history globally, the early 90s, it was permitted for medical use in Israel. So they were one of the first countries. In 92, Meshulam discovered the endocannabinoid system. So this gentleman discovered that cannabis actually works on a system inside of every living being's body. So we all have an endocannabinoid system, and cannabis is thought to, or this system is thought to regulate the other systems within the body and cause homeostasis. So that's why someone taking cannabis for pain might also find that their sleep improves, their anxiety reduces. So patients often find a much better overall benefit when taking cannabis. Not everyone, but there are some patients that report that. Quick history in the U.S. In 96, the first U.S. state legalized medicinal cannabis. That was in California. And at the moment, election results aside, it's legal in various forms in 47 out of 50 states. In 2001, Health Canada legalized cannabis for medical purposes, and 17 years later, they legalized it recreationally there. Now, you would have seen the New Zealand referendum. They just voted no for legalizing cannabis for recreational use. So there is still some hurdles to come on a global scale, but it is legal there, as it is in the UK and Australia for medicinal use, which is great. So that discovery, if we go back to the THC and the recent legalization, has led to a flurry of investigations in terms of research. And we're seeing that research today in terms of there's been over 200 studies in the last 5 years, and whereas there were only 600 studies published in the previous 45 years. So there's a flurry of investigations, which is great. Looking at medical cannabis in Australia, it's a very much patient-led journey, and it has been from its inception in terms of being legal. So this is Dan Haslam with his mother, Lucy Haslam. Lucy is one of the biggest advocates for patient access in Australia today, and has been for the last 10 years. So Lucy's son, Dan Haslam, pictured, unfortunately passed away from bowel cancer in 2015. But what he found was that cannabis really helped with his nausea, his pain, and his general wellness through his cancer treatment. And so him and his mom, who's a nurse, fought to have medical cannabis legalized in Australia for patients. Now, unfortunately, Dan wasn't alive to see when it was legalized, but a year after he passed away, it was legalized in Australia, and that's all because of all the hard work him and his mom continues to do today. So in 2017, we saw the first product being imported into Australia for patient access. And in July 2018, the first Australian product was available for patient use. That was a Little Green Pharma product. So our company proudly brought that to patients, and it's proudly a patient-led journey. So you're a patient wanting to access it. You're not alone. It's very much led by patients, and it's then up to companies like ourselves to educate doctors. And that's something that our company and other companies are, of course, happy to do. So how many patients are accessing it? So medical cannabis is illegal, but available through the special access scheme because it's an unregistered medicine. So what does that mean? So in 2018, there were 2,500 patients that were doctors who applied to access it for their patients via the special access scheme. To understand the growth, in 2019, that number increased sixfold, and today that number has increased another almost 2 times again. So all up, that says July, that should say September, there were over 67,000 patients or 67,000 applications made through the special access scheme for medical cannabis. So does that mean 67,000 patients are taking medical cannabis? No, it doesn't. And I'll explain that. So it's estimated that about 2/3 of that number, around 44,000 patients, have accessed medicinal cannabis. And it's estimated around 22,000 are taking it today. And that's based on a recent Senate judiciary hearing where they were talking about cannabis and access. So, and that's because doctors applying for patients, they sometimes might decide a different ratio would be suitable. That counts as a new application, or that they need to switch products for certain reasons. So that's just a quick overview in terms of the patient's access and what those numbers mean. So what is it being used to treat? Another really good question. The majority of patients are using it for pain. So this graph was part of a Senate inquiry into patient access, and these stats were presented by the TGA based on the special access scheme application. So this indicated, and this reflects the data that Little Green Pharma have as well, that's around 70% of patients are accessing it for pain. So that can be things like fibromyalgia. It can be things like migraines, neuropathic pain. If you were to include cancer pain, that number would be about 80%. And then other conditions that it's really commonly used for more and more, things like anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, also really well known and utilized in terms of the media around patients wanting to access it for their children with epilepsy or seizures. It's also used for things like movement disorders. That can be Parkinson's. It can be spasticity associated with multiple sclerosis, and also sleep. So about 2% of patients are accessing it for sleep or insomnia. So that just gives you an idea of the types of patients. A common misnomer is that cannabis, there has to be an approved indication. There are no approved indications, but if there's research to support the application for the condition that the patient wants to use it for, the TGA will approve it. So as of this time, or December last year, there were more than 130 conditions that were approved for treatment with medical cannabis. So let's talk a little bit about the illicit access, and I'm going to start to speed up because I'm running out of time. So this is Ian McGregor, who heads up the Lambert Initiative in Sydney through the University of Sydney, and they're looking into research into cannabis, doing some great stuff. He estimates around 100,000 Australians are using illicit cannabis for medical purposes. So let's just look into that in a little bit more detail. So medical versus illicit cannabis, same, right? And this is something I just want you guys who are thinking about accessing it illicitly versus medical, that's your right, although you need to understand the dangers of accessing illicit cannabis or the what can happen. So let me just take you through that. So they're not really the same thing. So if you look at labeling of illicit products, and this is actually looking at legal overseas markets where products are available for sale, but the countries like the US and the UK don't have guidelines around testing in terms of what goes into that product. So looking at the US legal market, this is edibles. There was a study published that showed, looking at the edible market and testing 45 products, only 13 out of those 45 products, or 17%, were labeled accurately. So that means 83% of those products in the US being sold legally were inaccurately labeled, 87% inaccurately labeled. So again, just a word of caution in terms of what you're trying to access, why you're accessing it, and what you're actually getting. If you look at products purchased online in the US through the legal means and legal market, of those 84 products tested in this study, only 26 out of the 84, or 31%, were labeled accurately. So again, let's flip that, and it's 69% of those products were labeled inaccurately, or were inaccurately labeled. So again, just something to keep in mind if you're looking at purchasing products from overseas and bringing them in. Looking at the UK market, there's CBD market, which is a legal market. Again, of the 29 products tested, only 11 out of the 29 were accurately labeled. So this is, again, the legal market in the UK. 62% of those products are inaccurately labeled. What's concerning is if you dig a bit deeper, 50% of those products, or 38 of those products, had less than 50% of what was on the label. So the active ingredients were less than half of what they said were in that bottle. 45% of those products had measurable levels of THC. So patients buying a CBD product over the counter legally in the UK, almost half of them had measurable levels of THC. So think of the danger of that if you're pulled over and tested for driving or did workplace testing. So these are just some of the things you need to be aware of if you're considering purchasing products through the black market or through legal overseas markets. The other thing to be aware of is things like pesticides and heavy metals. A story I tell a lot, but it's true. Hemp has actually been used in Chernobyl to remove radiation from the soil. So hemp is a very absorbent product. Cannabis absorbs everything in the soil. So it's just something to be aware of. So your neighbor might be growing it in their backyard organically, but they don't realize that the people that lived in that house before may have dumped chemicals in the soil, or there might be heavy metals in the soil, or they may have used pesticides, which are still in that soil, and they're being absorbed by that cannabis that he's growing organically. That happens a lot. And if a cannabis product does have pesticide in it, if that product goes to seed and then goes to seed again, that pesticide is going to flow through that family of seeds over generations. So again, just something to be aware of. So quickly run through this study because I'm running out of time. I apologize. Looking at illicit cannabis, this was a Pelican study published in 2018. Parents sourcing illicit cannabis for their children with uncontrolled epilepsy. They tested 51 samples. So these parents thought they were giving their children pure CBD. Of those 51 samples, 38 out of 51 were perceived as effective, and 24 of those samples had no CBD at all. 13 out of 51 were perceived not effective, and 2 of those products had absolutely zero CBD whatsoever. Almost all of them had THC. So these parents carefully sourcing illicit CBD for their children. Only 2 out of those 51 products sourced for their children, their precious children with refractory epilepsy, had CBD only. Or 98% of these products sourced illicitly for these children were inaccurately labeled. So again, just a word of caution. You do what you think is going to be right, but just understand the risks if this is the path that you're going to go down. In terms of Australian cultivation, I'll take you very quickly through Little Green Pharma. So I'll show you where we are. So we grow in the southwest of WA, somewhere in that circle. Unfortunately, I can't tell you where it is because that's to protect our staff and the people that work in our grow room. I'll take you through the process. So we use mother plants or clones. So every product we produce is a clone of an original mother plant. We rotate those about every 3 months. We grow indoor. We do that on purpose so we can control the lighting, the humidity, the temperature, the water, and the nutrients. That is so we get a more consistent product for patients. By controlling all those things, we get the most consistent outcome. A typical grow, depending on the cultivar or the strain, takes between 10 and 14 weeks. Once the product is grown, this is one of our recent harvests in our grow room. It took us 10 people 2 days to do 200 plants. So it's a very detailed, laborious process and something that's done very clinically because it's in a GMP approved growing facility. The drying then takes about 2 weeks. We're testing for humidity and the moisture content. We test for that moisture regularly, daily, and we're trying to get it down to a 10% moisture level. Once we get it down to that, we send it off for testing, for the first testing. So Australia, we're grateful, has some of the most strict testing on a global scale. So we're testing from everything from ash to pesticides, heavy metals, foreign matter, molds, bacteria, and we're doing that to ensure patient safety. So that's the first test we do, and that's part of what's called the Therapeutic Goods Order 93, and that's what guarantees that you, the patient, gets a really pure product that's free of any dangerous things. This is an example of some of the testing that they do. Then we extract. So there's two types of extraction commonly used, CO2 and ethanol. At the moment, we're doing ethanol extraction, and this is one of the machines that does that for us. We pull out the resin. We don't. We use full plant extract, so all the terpenes, the flavonoids, the minor cannabinoids are still in the final product. From there, so that's a picture of the flower. What we're after are these trichomes, and that contains all the goodness and minor cannabinoids and terpenes, and then it comes into like a sticky paste or resin. So to manufacture the product, we then test that resin again to make sure, test the THC and the CBD content. So that's the second test we do in the pharmaceutical process. And the third is we then mix the resins with MCT oil and get a final product. And then we send it off for final product testing again. And there we're testing for just the active ingredients, so just the THC and the CBD, although there are minor cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, and that are the TGO 93 declares we need to leave plus or minus 10% of what is in that product. So we then send off that TGO 93 declaration to the TGA, and they were then able to sell the product in market. So that's a very detailed example of what an Australian GMP manufactured process looks like, and why we're proud to be able to offer that. If you have any questions, those are my details. Thanks for listening, and yeah, I look forward to the Q&A. Thanks.
Hi everybody, I hope you've enjoyed the presentation so far. I'm your last presenter tonight, and I'm just going to have a quick talk to you about clinical trials in Australia. Now, let me just start with talking about why we need trials. So we need trials to give evidence for our medical providers and our prescribers, and also to our decision makers and legislators. So they require evidence and efficacy for certain conditions of particular products. At present, medicinal cannabis is classed as an unapproved medicine by the TGA, which means it's not listed on the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods. To actually be part of this register, particular products have to go through clinical trials, which means usually they're high participant number trials, they're non-biased, and they're usually placebo-controlled. Usually we use randomized controlled trials, RCTs, to do these type of trials. Once they have gone through these trials, they are eligible then to be listed on the Australian Register, and from there they can be considered for the PBS, the Pharmaceutical Benefits Fund, and of course this is where we seek affordable medicines. So usually to go on the PBS they do need to show that they are quite economical and very efficacious for certain conditions. So let's have a look at what's happening in Australia. So a bit of a breakdown of what's happening in Australia. We've got 69 identified patient studies that are either announced in the media or they've been recently completed or are in progress. So really we can look at Australia as being a hotbed of clinical research compared to a lot of other places in the world. We should be quite proud of that. So of these trials, these 69 trials, we've got 11 that aren't actually registered just yet on any global trial register, including the Australian and New Zealand register. So we're left with 52 trials where we have 7 that don't have ethics approval, but that just means that they are awaiting ethics, but they probably will get ethics approval. And of those, we have 10 using synthetic cannabinoids, but I'm actually going to concentrate on the plant-derived products. or trials. 21 groups are looking at non-commercial, or 21 groups are non-commercial, which means that they're run by usually universities and similar groups. We also have 29 commercial research groups undergoing trials, and these are usually product companies putting their products through trials to be looking at getting them on the therapeutic register. Having a look at what actual trials are going ahead, we've got 9 looking at safety and tolerability. So they take healthy participants here and they just having a look to see, are there any adverse effects? Are they tolerated well? And then from there, they'll go into trials to look at whether they're efficacious for certain conditions. We also have 8 cancer and cancer symptom trials. We have 4 epilepsy and seizure syndrome trials, 5 chronic pain, 5 looking at insomnia and other sleep disorders. We've got 4 trials where we're looking at driving and cannabinoids. And this, of course, is really, really important to get this kind of evidence out there, because we do have a lot of patients that are taking medicinal cannabis products, but at the moment, without proof, we can't have them driving because we don't know whether that's going to impair their driving. So it's great having these studies. There's 1 autism spectrum disorder trial, yes, and 1 behavioural disorder study as well. There's also a myriad of other indications like Tourette's syndrome, prevention of acute graft versus host disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or motor neuron disease, gingivitis, inflammation, muscle damage, and functional recovery after exercise, anxiety disorders, dementia, alcohol withdrawal, also Rett syndrome. And there's also a couple of trials looking at their observational trials looking at a lot of all conditions basically that are being prescribed in Australia, and I'll talk about those a little further on. Now, in terms of international participation, most of these are coming under the GW Pharma umbrella. GW Pharma has their research arm, GW Research, and there are, as you can see, Dravet syndrome, tuberous sclerosis, and Rett syndrome. I'll just go into those a little more detail. CBD cannabidiol for children with Dravet's. We have children in Victoria and New South Wales participating in this trial. This has actually been completed, so we're just awaiting that to be written up in the literature now. We also have an open label extension trial of CBD for tuberous sclerosis complex. 12 children in New South Wales are participating in this trial. And we also have Rett syndrome, which is an open label extension study of a CBD solution in patients with Rett's. And we have clinical trial sites in Perth and South Brisbane. This is expected to be completed next year in September. All right, just having a look at Australian-wide trials at the moment. We have a randomised controlled, double-blind placebo-controlled trial with tetrahydrocannabinol or THC and cannabidiol CBD for the treatment of Tourette's. We have 24 patients that are undergoing this trial, and this is being run through the Wesley Research Institute and Lambert Initiative. We also have a couple of observational trials going ahead, and this data is really important because we can get many thousands of patients looked at and their data collected, and this is still very, very important evidence for prescribing. So we've got one that is looking at dosage patterns and efficacy of medicinal cannabis treatments in patients receiving medicinal cannabis for any condition, and this is looking at 2,000 patients, and that's going through Canvalate Clinics and Swinburne University. And then the other one is called the Cannabinoid Medicine Observational Study, which is the open label observational study of cannabinoid prescribing and dosage patterns in Australia, also looking at all conditions. 20,000 patients are expected to be examined in this study, and that is going ahead with Applied Cannabis Research. This is a research company, and also Cannabis Access Clinics. Now, the last one I'll just briefly talk about is one that I think is quite exciting. It's cannabinoid or CBD as a treatment for young people at ultra high risk for psychosis. And this is proposed to be an RCT, 405 patients across Australia. And this is being run through Origin, and they've also secured a UK grant from the Wellcome Trust. So it'll be really great to see the results of that one. And that's all from me. So please stay online because we'll be having our Q&A now. And please, if you haven't already, get some questions together in the Q&A function on the side of your Zoom screen. And we'll see you with the panel in just a moment. Thank you. Now I'm going to invite my panelists back, my presenters back to be a panel so we can take some of your questions. So I've actually got a couple of questions that have been emailed to me, and I thought they were good. So I'll read these out first and then I'll have a look through our other questions. So, how has medicinal cannabis advanced in the treatment of multiple sclerosis? Maybe perhaps Jamie?
My screen blacked out.
Has it advanced? I think the more we do it, the more understanding how it can help, especially for treating difficult symptoms. I mean, I think in terms of advancement, that's a difficult concept because there isn't really one. It's endocannabinoid system being manipulated by cannabinoids to treat difficult symptoms. So the advancement comes through research and evidence base, and more people using cannabinoids, and possibly the kind of evolution of the products we're using. But it's an ancient system, so it's really the science that advances, not the actual treatment, because that's cannabinoids, endocannabinoid system.
Has anyone else got something to add?
I think we've also learned a lot in the last 2.5, 3 years, just in terms of what ratios, where to start, how to titrate patients, things like that. And I think Australia is a really good example of a country that's led in terms of the way it has approached medical cannabis. Although it was not easy early on, the TGA has definitely come to the party in terms of allowing ease of access. They turn around applications within 2 days. But the way that they're collecting information, it means that we understand what ratios are being used for what conditions and how much is being used. So those are all answers that if you were to ask a doctor in Canada or the US that's been prescribing for years, they don't usually have any idea, because they'll send their patients to a dispensary who will then give their patients the medication. So there's a disconnect between those ratios and the benefit that patient's seeing. So I think from that perspective, in terms of the evolution of cannabis, particularly in Australia, we're leading by example in many ways.
For sure. Another email question I've got: will medical cannabis be available on the shelves in a chemist in the foreseeable future? And this is from Werner.
Absolutely, I'll jump in there.
Behind you.
The TGA supported it, the government supports it, and most of the feedback from the industry, they supported it. And I think one of the only major groups against it was this Medical Association, who were looking after their members' rights. They wanted to, in my opinion, retain it for doctors' prescription. But it's available most other Western countries in the world, throughout Europe, throughout the US, Canada, and the sky hasn't fallen in. It's slated to happen circa February, March 2021. It may be a while before products get registered, but it's definitely going to happen. And I think you'll see a massive downward trend on prices, CBD, that stage.
Great. Okay, I've got a question here from Rachel. I would like to understand if this could assist someone with chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia, and how do I go about getting a prescription?
So that's getting a prescription is, you find a doctor who has experience with cannabinoid medicine and is prepared to see you, assess you, and then go through the kind of application process. In terms of the conditions, we don't treat specific conditions, we treat symptoms. So fibromyalgia, for instance, will result in pain. So the indication is chronic pain. There's lots of evidence and ongoing research and theory about endocannabinoid deficiencies and how conditions like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel, migraine their kind of etiology is in a deficiency of the endocannabinoid system, but that's not how we can theorize around that when we're prescribing it, but the indications are symptoms, so anxiety, chronic pain, insomnia, movement disorders, spasticity, and within those symptoms, many medical conditions will fit. So that's how we approach it through the way the TGA has allowed us to prescribe it at the moment. But there's a lot more going on than that, but that's not the kind of premise for actually obtaining it.
Okay. Now, I know that this is another good one for you, Jamie. How does medicinal cannabis assist symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder?
Good question. So in terms of the way we would access it in Australia at the moment, we would be looking at symptoms like anxiety or insomnia as a result of nightmares as a reason for the symptom behind why we're prescribing it. And PTSD is actually an indication within itself because it represents a kind of group of difficult symptoms for patients. So that's how you access it. But beyond that, there's a lot of really interesting research into how CBD is involved in encoding memory and how it can disrupt encoding negative memory and how it can disrupt the retrieval of negative memory. So there's a very complex kind of neurophysiological, mechanism that CBD is involved in, and that needs lots more research. And I think there'll be lots more research in the future about using CBD with therapy to treat PTSD and how that down regulation of the kind of hypervigilant response can be worked through to re-encode memory, basically. So, but we're not there yet. That research hasn't been done. So it's been done in animal models and there's lots of theories and it all makes sense. But right now we are treating the symptoms of PTSD through rebalancing an endocannabinoid system, basically.
Can I just add something about PTSD, that we've got a range of different drugs for a lot of different conditions, but for many PTSD sufferers, they exhaust everything we've got on our shelf and in our toolbox, and there's no other treatment options. And even though this is experimental and there's some really great research trials underway that need to be completed to prove once and for all that it does work, but these patients can access it currently under the special access through doctors like Jamie, doctors who do telehealth, where everything else has failed. And some of these patients are reporting success, others not, but it's certainly something that can access now until all the research has been done.
Yeah, I mean, PTSD is a great example of a condition that, we're not treating very well in the current paradigm. And there's lots of treatments that are going to there's a few treatments and newer ways of approaching it that will come out in the next couple of years. But that is very much to do with the fact that our current pharmacology doesn't really treat the causes of PTSD. It sort of fits outside the medical model, but that's changing.
Lesley, can we hear you? Just say something for us. Great, because I've got a question for you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I video to work.
So once your oil treatment started, Lesley, how long did it take for you to feel an effect?
I actually started in the first week. I knew that something was happening because I had chronic eczema, and that disappeared in the first week, and the arthritis in my hip.
That's fantastic. And it's ongoing, right?
Yep, it's all going good still.
Good one. Okay, what else have we got here? Is there any evidence of medicinal cannabis helping SLE patients' pain? If so, is there any evidence of CBD causing or making psychosis, as lupus causes neurological issues? It's a good one.
Pain, yes, it will help pain regardless of its etiology. Psychosis, CBD is an antipsychotic. Most of the time it's not causing psychosis, it's causing the opposite. And if we look at unopposed THC as being a potential to cause psychosis, it's CBD that protects people from that. So regardless of what's causing the pain, we're treating pain, and it may or may not work because it doesn't work for everybody. And CBD is an antipsychotic, not a psychotic.
Okay. Has there been any research done on the benefits of CBD oil to reduce inflammation for those suffering from ulcerative colitis? We know that there has. I couldn't quote it for you, but definitely we know that CBD has protection against inflammation. Did anyone want to expand further on that?
Yeah, I mean, CBD and THC are both anti-inflammatories. I think THC is, I think it's something like 15 times more potent than aspirin and 3 times more potent than prednisolone. I'm not sure about the exact figures for CBD. I have seen some research looking at inflammatory bowel diseases, and it, it definitely helps. And anecdotally, lots of my patients who have inflammatory bowel disease who use medicinal cannabis report significant changes in their well-being, but we are still treating pain. That's the indication, not ulcerative colitis. That's not what we apply to the TGA for.
Sorry, Jamie, do you mind just speaking up? Just your voice is a little bit...
it's my microphone's gone.
Much better, thank you.
Where did we get to?
No, keep going.
Heard you. So ulcerative colitis, for instance, is not really an indication at the moment. Pain is. And there's all the secondary benefits that occur from rebalancing the endocannabinoid system and the return of homeostasis and the kind of anti-inflammatory effects with that. But it's still pain that we're treating.
So here's one for you, Paul, or maybe Jamie too. Does CBD interact with other medications such as lamotrigine or Keppra, and can it be trialled whilst on other drugs, or does the patient need to be off these drugs before trialling?
There are a number of interactions. There's a number of theoretical interactions, should I say, but there's very few significant interactions, and that's why the government are recommending that it be allowed to be sold over the counter. Now it does, it is metabolized by cytochrome P450. There's nothing major. There's a lot more interactions with THC, and it is very, very well tolerated. Generally, you take it if you're on another medication, and you may then, like an opioid or a medication for pain, you start off taking both, and you might wean off the other medication if you don't need it anymore, if your pain is being managed by CBD, for instance.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's this enzyme system in the liver that's very much theoretical. I read a case report recently for a guy who had mitral regurgitation, was on warfarin for his INR, and he got to something like 400 milligrams of CBD a day, and it still wasn't affecting the metabolism of his warfarin. So it's very much theoretical. And in terms of other medications, I don't stop any when I start people on medicinal cannabis. Everything stays the same, and then it evolves. And the analogy I give my patients is when you've got a ripper of a toothache, every 4 to 6 hours you check your clock and you take your Panadol and you take your Nurofen, and then as your toothache gets better, you stop reaching for the Panadol and the Nurofen and you stop checking your clock. And this works exactly the same way. As that endocannabinoid system kicks in and your body starts to sort of work better and do what it wants to do, people will stop reaching for those painkillers, or they'll stop reaching for their their anti-anxiety drugs or whatever it is, because they're not needing them anymore because the medicinal cannabis has taken over. And if they're still needing them, then the medicinal cannabis either hasn't been titrated properly, hasn't had enough time to work, or it's not going to work, all of which are possibilities. But when it does work, it's profound. And, you know, people go from using multiple medications to one or two.
Okay. We've just got so many questions. Thank you all so much for all of these questions. So we probably only have time for a few more, but we will try and still answer these anyway. Now someone's asked, do all pharmacies provide your prescription, or do you have to go to special pharmacies?
Any pharmacy in Australia can dispense medical cannabis. It was really funny when we first started sending out medical cannabis to pharmacies to dispense by the doctors. We had a few of them ring up and say, no, we don't want patients coming to our pharmacy getting high. And we got straight on the phone to them and said, look, no, these patients are using it for chronic pain. They're getting on a lot of other medication. They're getting relief when they can't above all else. And it's amazing how often those pharmacies and pharmacists rang me back and said, this is great, this patient had tried all this other medication and this really changed her life, and she was so grateful for me for dispensing a prescription. But pretty much any pharmacy in Australia can dispense it. And there's most GPs, it used to be specialists only prescribing, now it's really come a long way in 3 to 4 years that the cannabis system in Australia has been active.
And I guess one other thing to just add to that, Paul, is that pharmacies will order it in for that patient. It's not something that they'll have on a shelf because it is an unregistered medicine. So it might take a day or two by the time the pharmacist places the order, but it's usually sent next day from the distributor like Health House.
Now I did have a really great one. Just trying to find it again because we've got so many. We had a question here about accessing for autism, and I know Kat had a very big ordeal when she was trying to access. Just trying to find the question. I don't know if my panel can find it faster than me. I'll just have to let you know we've had, I reckon, nearly 100 questions. So going through these is taking a little while.
I can see the question. It's just, is there any benefit for autism spectrum disorder? From an anonymous attendee.
Thanks, Kat.
I'm more than happy to jump in. Obviously, disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a mum. Sorry, my camera's not working. I don't know why. My son is Carter, who I spoke about. He has cerebral palsy, but also has level 3 autism. So anybody who is familiar with autism knows the complexities, and that no two people with autism are the same. So I'm only speaking from my personal experience. And also another family member of mine who also has autism and PTSD and is also legally prescribed cannabis, different strengths, but still medicinal cannabis. My son is on huge amounts of medication for pain, but pain also affects his behaviours. Since being on cannabis, everything has improved, but autism-specific things, his anxiety has reduced. So being able to leave the house is much improved. For my adult family member who is on a very different dosage of cannabis, so as an adult being on cannabis, he had the choice of being able to use a higher dose THC with a lower dose CBD because he doesn't have pain. But the higher dose, and I'm not talking ridiculously high, but higher than my son is on. He had not held a conversation, a non-necessary conversation with somebody in almost 6 months. And within 2 days of beginning his medicinal cannabis, he has attended 5 social functions with our family, which he previously would not attend due to anxiety and panic attacks and things like that. He's said that it has given him the ability to slow down and make more reasonable and rational decisions rather than being panicked. For my son, when he had started his cannabis, we noted a huge difference in, and I don't mean behaviours in a negative, horrible sense, but in terms of his anxiety-caused behaviours, there was quite a significant reduction. Our GP, who prescribes with the specialist over in Sydney, for pain and autism. So I can't say who will and won't do it specifically for autism, but it's definitely worth getting in touch with someone like Sharlene and finding out the GPs, especially in Perth, who are willing to consider the options.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Kat.
No worries.
I think I'll just read one more question, and it's something, it's a subject that's super interesting. A CBD topical, when will this be available?
I'd love to be able to sell and wholesale one now. I've seen anecdotally some amazing reports. As some of you are probably aware, there's CB1 and 2 receptors throughout the body, including on the skin. And I think for topical pain in particular, which is a huge area of need, I'd really like to see the research and the products available. I'm sure Jamie would be interested in dispensing them and trialing them on some of his patients.
Oh yeah, I think that it's interesting because I was just looking at another question which sort of is in the same area, because someone asked about vaporizing instead of smoking. And I think, you know, topical suppositories, patches, creams, aerosols, you know, we're in the infancy of medical cannabis as prohibition ends. And as this moves forward, it's not going to be what it's looked like in the past. It's going to change, and we're going to have extremely advanced delivery mechanisms, knowing exactly what we're delivering, much higher amounts of minor cannabinoids, knowing exactly what the terpenes are, and bigger understanding of how those minor cannabinoids, terpenes, THC and CBD are working, what their bioavailability is, what the best ways to ingest them are. And it's very exciting. And when we talk about smoking or this kind of stuff, it's just like, it's over there. It's not, I'm not interested in it. It's not what I'm doing. And I think most people on this panel would agree.
It gives the wrong levels.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you know, like another analogy is another plant, which is the opiate plant, Papaver somniferum, you know, the street version's heroin. But you don't think about heroin when you're given morphine for appendicitis in ED, or you're given fentanyl when you're having your tonsils out in theatre. And the further we can get away from how cannabis has been used under prohibition, the better for our patients who can access these medicines. And it's as simple as that. You know, people talk about cookies. I mean, it's a medical model. We're using highly potent medicines in a focused way to treat medical conditions, and you know, that's where we're going, and it's not going to look anything like it has in the past pretty quickly.
Okay, I think we'll have to conclude there. Thank you so much to my presenters and panelists. You've been amazing. Barb, thank you very much to Little Green Pharma for supporting this education, and we hope to be putting out a lot more of these webinars in the future. Thank you everybody for joining us, and I hope you've enjoyed the presentations and the panel. And please do follow Medical Cannabis Research Australia on social media and all the other social platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Please feel free to email me if you'd like some advice. If I can help you, I absolutely will. So thank you very much.
I can vouch for that one. Darling, you are the reason that we managed to have the success that we have. So if anyone needs someone to talk to about it, you are definitely the right person.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.